you?
Hey, how are you? Great to
Oh,
see
I'm
you.
so good. Look at all
Good.
these faces. So, okay, everybody, we are going to jump in because we've got a lot of content and not very much time. So we need you all to listen fast, and we'll talk even faster. My name is Jen Davis. I am the Vice President of MAPS Coaching. I also run a real estate team in Springfield, Missouri. And we sell right about 525 houses a year, about half of which are buy-sides. I have been out of production for a little bit, which is why my good friend Kari is here, because we want to make sure that we've got market of the moment information for all of you that are working with buyers. So Kari, do you want to introduce yourself?
I can, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Yes, so I'm Kari Wyrsch. I'm the lead buyer's agent for Kari Real Estate, which is also in Springfield, Missouri. I run a showing partner model. And so I've got two showing partners. Last year, we were a part of 232 buy-side transactions out of our 513 that our team did. We run a pretty similar model to Jen. It's very team dependent. We only have 7 agents in production. And so it's me and then the two showing partners.
It's pretty amazing. So 232 buy-side closings last year with you and 2 showing agents. So I like to look at it, Kari, and I know you do too, that a buyer agent isn't a less than role on a team, right? So we look at a buyer agent as an empire builder, right? So we're part of the growing of the business. And one of the things that recently you talked to Gary and Jason about on stage at Mega Camp was kind of this idea behind a strategy session. So many of our agents that are on here potentially have heard this called a buyer consult before. So talk me through kind of the idea behind a strategy session, and then we'll jump into these 5 steps.
Yeah, so I think that, doing the strategy sessions as many times as we've kind of come up with some of these buzzwords, right? You're going to hear some of them today, that it just kind of helps pique a little bit of interest. And in the market that we've been in the market that we're in now, and the market we're going into, we need to be strategic, right? We've got to strategize with our clients on how we're going to get them their dream home. And it really is a true process. When you slow everything down, it will actually speed everything up, right? I mean, the whole concept of we want to have you come in and ask you 100 questions so we can show you 4 houses versus showing 100 houses because we only ask 4 questions. It does nothing but create just dissatisfaction. They lose trust in you. They feel like you don't know what you're doing. And so the strategy session is really just kind of asking them a ton of questions, getting really, really in depth with what they want so that you can go find and meet their needs.
I love that. It's the idea that the difference between a buyer consult and a strategy session to me feels like the proactive versus the reactive, right? It's us being the partner in the relationship with the buyer to say, we've got this, right? We're the expert in this. Kyle Rawls, who is a MAPS client, said one time, the perfect offer starts in the strategy session. Yeah. So everything that when we move on from kind of a strategy session into showings or negotiations, any hiccup that you typically find in your process could be corrected with a tweak to your strategy session. So let's jump in. I'm going to kind of forward past my bio. We've already done the introductions. If you have content questions, my email is on the screen. It's jen.davis@kw.com. If there's anything specific for Kari, I can forward it to her. Any administrative questions will go to fasttrack@kw.com. This will be recorded and uploaded within 24, I think, to 48 hours. So you will get it. Okay. So Kari, talk me through, what do you do to prepare for a strategy session?
I think the big thing is, as buyer's agents, especially in the market that we're in, is you need to know your numbers, knowing what the market is doing every single day, paying attention to that. And so that way, whenever they come in, they have any questions, you're prepared. I like to have my screen up so that if they have specific questions, whether it's in regards to a city or a subdivision, that we can have a really good conversation around that, because value is in the numbers. People, anytime that you start talking numbers and data, it gives you value. And the whole point of the strategy session is we're building value with each other so that they want to hire us and we want to work with them.
Mhm. So talk me through like a little bit about, I know you said having those numbers. What are some numbers that you would think would be important as a buyer's agent to be somewhat kind of always just to have in your back pocket? You're in a strategy session and you know these statistics. What would those maybe 3 or 2, 3, 4 of those be?
I always like to know absorption rate because I want to be able to talk about if we're in a buyer's market or a seller's market, if we're in a strategic market, if we're in a professionals market. Right now, I'm calling it a pipeline market. So I think knowing those numbers is really, really important. The other thing is, I have an inside sales associate team. And so oftentimes before I go into the meeting, I already have a pretty good grasp as to who that buyer is and what their price point is.
Mhm.
So, if they're in a higher price point, I kind of have an idea of what the market's looking like. Granted, I don't know maybe exact locations that they're in, but if they're a $150,000 buyer, that strategy session may be a little bit different than somebody that's going to be in a $500,000 price range. Our average sales price is $265,000. Just to kind of give you guys a baseline of where we are in our market. So I just think that it helps that I'm prepping the $150,000 buyer that, this may take a little bit longer. And it's setting an expectation of, multiple offers or whatever that is at that time.
Mhm.
So those are super important. I like to know my contracts written to contracts accepted, just because I think that as people come in and they want to see your value, they want to know that you're capable. And so I think that that's another one to know and follow and track.
Mhm. So I love that. I think what I'm hearing and what I want everyone to pick up on is there are ways to do this that we would consider best practice versus common practice. And so the idea of being prepared for somebody to come in and to meet with you, there are all types of things that happen. So we know our market statistics, we know our statistics, right? We might even talk about in general how many homes that we typically show a buyer, so that you're already starting to, one of the buzzwords that Kari already said is expectations. The relationship is built on the conversations that you're willing to have. And what I have found is conversion rates go up when we really dig into those conversations and we go deep into the conversation, because that's that conversion. That's when you start showing enough value that people are like, this is somebody I want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to put together, a marketing packet, Kari, what would be, I mean, I assume that you've got testimonials in there and kind of like, are there other things that you would include in that?
So I do give everyone a packet whenever they come and meet with a strategy session. I think that's super important. I mean, anytime you're doing anything, the most important value you can give is get something in their hands. If you're doing an open house, you want to get their your business card in their hands. You want to get the information sheet. You want to give them something so that they have value and they remember who you are, right? So for us, I give them information about, our hours of operation is one of them. I have flow charts of what the entire contract to close looks like. I have our loyalty agreement. I have the don'ts of mortgage. The don't go quit your job, don't go open new lines of credit, buy a truck, all those kind of things. So it's just giving them a lot of value the entire time. Our mission statements in there as well. So yeah, we're just trying to give them as much information as possible.
I think that's important. And for those of you that are on here that you're like, I'm not part of a team, I'm an individual agent, I'm a new agent, we do have slides that are available. So we just finished up Mega Agent Camp. And so oftentimes from the stage, Gary will go through, in general terms, what's going on in the market. They have some great slides around what to expect for interest rates, the difference between buying versus renting. You can utilize those types of slides in a strategy session. If you're a newer agent, even as a seasoned agent, that may be something that's useful for you. But just know that you can get that information anywhere. And then including any type of preferred lender information, right? We typically want to recommend more than one. So we typically are going with, somewhere around 3 of our top lenders that we know that they're going to be a team member for the buyer. They're going to jump in and help them out and explain anything around financing. And then we also utilize a buyer questionnaire. Sometimes we're actually going to use that on the phone. So when that first kind of inquiry comes in, we're We're
Mhm.
going to start filling that out, and then we're going to bring it with us into the strategy session just to ensure that we get all pieces of information accounted for.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay, so second thing, Kari, talk me through, you and I have talked a little bit about this, but when we get into a strategy session, if you're an individual agent, you want to make sure that you capture the person pretty fast, right out of the gate. We want to build rapport with them. And if you're on a team, you also kind of want to explain what happens with the team. So either way is great. And Kari and I are getting ready to launch a 6-week program where we're going to go really in depth in some of this. And yet for today, we want to touch on the high points. So Kari, how might you go about kind of explaining team structure? And then I can go from the perspective of if I'm an individual agent.
Okay, I love that. So for us, we do have an ISA department, and I run the showing partner model. The pass, which everybody always says, how do you do the pass? It happens during strategy session. It is one of the documents that is part of my value proposition that I give every single buyer when they're meeting with me. Oftentimes the inside sales associate, we call them ISAs. I will reference them several times, especially whenever I come in to meet them. I'm so excited to meet you. Claire's given me a ton of great notes. So I think I have a pretty good idea about background. However, I'm super excited to really get to know you and ask you a ton of questions, right? So I'm referencing her and they know that we're a part of a team. And then I also point out, whenever we're done with our buyer DNA, I turn the page around and I say, okay, so here I am right here. And it's a picture of me in my bio. This is me. And then this is my showing partner, Bo. He's one of my buyer's agents and he is going to be showing you property. And then this is my transaction manager and she's going to be helping through our contract to close. These are the 3 key people in your home purchase. Do you have any questions, right? So it's just really short and sweet, but it's setting the expectation that we are a team and we are an extension of each other. And I point that out even more. Bo and I sit next to each other and he's popping off properties to me. When you get him, you get me, right? We're valuing up the person so they don't feel like they're being passed off.
It's all in the way that we talk about things, right? It's that language of sales. One of the things as an individual agent that we want to offer is, so just like where Kari is saying, okay, we've got this amazing team and we've got you covered from all angles. The same works for an individual agent, right? I can say, you get me the whole time from start to finish. I'm the person that's going to get to help you. So I'm going to be there for the showings. I'm going to be there for writing the offer. I'm going to be there all the way through so that when there's any type of a question, you can reach out directly to me. And I'm going to be the person that holds your hand all the way through it. Kari and I both started there. We both at one point did all of this. So it's really important to understand that as we talk about things like showing partner models and ISAs, if you're not there yet, what we're after is kind of that first of the 6 personal perspectives, right? That self-mastery. When we get to self-mastery on the buyer side or on the listing side, it gives us the ability to really understand and appreciate that leverage later. So one of the things that I like to do in the beginning of a strategy session is kind of give that idea of a roadmap when everybody walks in. So we'll go through something like a conversation, like if Kari were my buyer, I would say, hey, Kari, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so excited to get to spend some time with you today. So we're here today to talk about what's going on in the market. We're going to talk about the home buying process and what you're excited to see in your next home. Then we're going to sign some paperwork to decide if we're going to work together. How does that sound? It's very conversational. So it doesn't have to be exactly this. Turn it into your words. How would you approach it? Yet notice that as we go through the strategy session, that's my accountability of, we are going to talk about what's happening in the market. We are going to talk about the home buying process. We're going to talk about your wants and your needs and what you're excited about. And then we're going to sign some paperwork. That's the forward pacing of they're not surprised when we get to the signed agreement.
Right.
And then Kari, talk me through, we have on the screen motivation timeline. I put, we in the content we wrote, spend 80% of your time on this and 20% on criteria. It's one of the most common mistakes I see a buyer agent make is they spend so much time on that criteria, bedrooms, bathrooms, that they don't spend time on motivation timeline. Why do you think it's so important to spend more time on this section, motivation timeline?
I just think it's so important that you meet people where they are and asking them a lot of questions. What about that is important to you? What would that do for you and your family? How could this change, where you're currently living at now? Really, really diving in. And I feel like, when you listen and people feel like you're listening to them, and then you're mirror matching and you're saying, so what I heard you say is,
Mhm.
tell me a little bit more about that. It just builds rapport really fast, and then asking about the timeline, I think, is super important, just because we need to understand, are we 6 weeks out? Are we 6 months out? How much time do we have? Like, how fast do we need to move? But it's just all about them. And I think that's the most important part, and that builds value.
I think so too. And I think the other part about timeline that's so important is we're still humans, and buyers agents can get tired. And there's this thing called buyer agent fatigue. And it tends to happen when we're running with buyers that aren't right now buyers. And we didn't slow down enough. Kari talked about earlier, slowing down enough to really understand where they're at. I'm going to meet with a buyer, whether they're six days out, 6 months out, or 6 years out, right? I want to be their realtor regardless of when they want to buy a house. I just don't want to show them all houses right now. So we've got to look at it from the perspective of, we want to meet them where they're at, yet buyers start to doubt an agent the more homes that we show them, right? Or the more homes that we negotiate and don't win. So this part is really also setting yourself up for success to be the expert in your buyer's eyes.
Well, and really quick, I mean, how often does their criteria, if it can be the right house, does it change just a little bit, right? Those bedrooms, those bathrooms, people tend to make a concession on something if the house is perfect. So we want to know those things, but we don't want to get held up on them.
That's exactly right. It's those non-negotiables, right? When we know the non-negotiables, like a school district or a price point, other things become kind of fluid as long as you make sure to hit those non-negotiables.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I like to do is kind of do a market analysis with the buyers. So they come in and, we've already set the stage where we're going to talk about the market. And the number one thing I like to ask when we start is, Kari, tell me what you know about the market. Well, one of two things is going to happen. Kari's going to understand what's going on with the market, and she's going to know it. And I'm going to understand that she's a seasoned and savvy buyer, and I'm going to validate what she knows and then come up with a game plan to move forward. Or Kari may not know, and that's cool too. And then I'm going to use the data and stories and all of these other things to educate Kari so that she feels confident moving forward. Because when she has confidence in buying, what tends to happen then is there's no buyer's remorse. She has a great experience. We only look at 2 or 3 homes. We only write one great offer to get it accepted because we've set these right expectations. And we've understood where Kari's baseline is. If I ask an open-ended question, I get to get Kari talking, and that strategy session now is hers and not mine, right? She's the one talking and I'm the one listening. So Kari, talk me through, we've got people in all areas of the country that are on this.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are in a seller's market and some are in a buyer's market. How do you talk this piece through with your buyer?
I think that it's just basically, asking them the question, anytime somebody says, how's the market? You always just say, it's fantastic. Why do you ask? Allow them to, take the conversation where it needs to go. So, I mean, seller's market, buyer's market, I mean, we've been in this market that we've been in for a long time. I think that asking them more questions, kind of like what you said, whether it's multiple offers or whether it's no inventory, or whether it's now we're starting to see more inventory coming on, we now have more options. What does that mean for you? Well, what it means that we can negotiate inspections. We have a lot more options of being able to, find you the right house for the right price. And so I think it just depends on where you are in the market. And as we know, it's been changing pretty much like every 3 months.
Yep.
And so keeping your pulse on the market so that you can have that conversation based off of where you are, that hyper local knowledge so that you can have conversations around it, I think is the most important part.
I agree. And you referenced kind of the best house at the best price. One of the things that I've always said to buyers, regardless of market, is my role is to find you the best house at the best price in the time frame that works best for you and your family. Best house, best price. Best price doesn't mean least expensive, right? Best price means what gets it done in a seller's market with low inventory. Best price might mean we can negotiate in a buyer's market. So what Kari just walked us through is the way that we start to make this about them, and we turn it so that we're just asking them questions. And then we mentioned partnering with a strong lender again. I think one of the things that we sometimes miss in this is kind of those vendor partners that we have. So Kari, when we move into the kind of the next section of the strategy session, which is a needs analysis, what are you like when we're spending our time in this? Because this is where criteria steps in, but it also kind of overlaps with that motivation and timeline, right? What's important to them? By when do they want to be there? Why is it important for you to ask if they've purchased a home before?
I like to always know if I'm working with a first-time home buyer or not, because I know that they're going to have a lot of questions. If they purchased a home, I always like to ask them about their experience that they've had, whether it was good or not so great. And if it wasn't so great, why? So that I can make it the best experience for them and turn their, thought process around based off of their previous experience. I also think that it kind of helps me know how knowledgeable they are and what that's going to be as far as like showings or, contract to close. I feel like it's always a big thing. I have a flow chart that I give everyone, and I always go over it very, very thoroughly with the first time home buyers. And if somebody has owned 7 houses, I'm going to say, I know you've purchased many houses. We're going to take you through this entire process, and it's all the way down to turn on your, trash service, switch over your utilities, like all of that. We go through it. So I think that it just helps. And so I can make it a really great experience.
What about for a first-time home buyer when that answer is no, I've never purchased a house before, then what?
I think that it's just, meeting them where they are and just knowing that they don't know what they don't know. And when you're doing the needs analysis, what you oftentimes find with a first-time home buyer is whenever you say, what do you want? They don't know what they want. They don't know. And when you say what you don't want, they're like, I don't know what I don't want. I know I don't want to live in an apartment anymore. And I know that I want a yard because I haven't had a yard and I would love a garage. But, sometimes it's, okay, so when we go look at a house, I want you to be really, really vocal and tell me all of the things, because you're going to have to learn a lot whenever you're in the house with them versus just meeting and them saying like, I've already lived in 4 houses. I don't want this, 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 and I want this, 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 this. They don't know what they don't know.
I love that perspective. And I think that's the thing with first-time home buyers. You have the ability to write their story and what they expect in great customer service. You also want to know, is there a parent involved? Is there a grandparent? Is there an Uncle Bob that's going to be in the crawl space of every house, making sure that it's all, like we want to know who are those decision makers.
Yep.
And one of the things I put on here is this idea of buyers are liars. So I tend to sometimes get on a soapbox on this, and I'm not going to because of the length of time. This is an agent issue. When we get into it with buyers and we look up and we've shown them more than 3 or 4 homes and they're going from a condo to land to, all of different cities and different locations. What happened is we probably caught them at the top of the lead funnel. We probably really didn't identify their timeline and motivation. So what's happened is their mind keeps changing because they're maybe not actually ready to buy. So what we've got to do is look at a regroup opportunity of just, hey, I think I missed something. This is one of the things that we dig really deep into in our 6-week course of what does that look like? How do those questions sound? So kind of the final piece of this is, do we like each other? Is this a good fit, right? Are we going to work well together? Because there's as much of the time where I've been like, I don't know that I can help this person, as that person is maybe not wanting to work with me, right? It doesn't happen often. And when it does, it's pretty clear when it's going to work or not work. So when I get to the end of that strategy session, I have a pretty good idea of, are they going to sign this agreement with me or not? So we've kind of run through, Kari, kind of learning to ask questions and establishing motivation, what those non-negotiables are versus the wants. It's interesting though. I got to hear you last week at Mega Camp talk about the idea of a loyalty agreement.
Mhm.
What's the difference in that versus what somebody might call like a buyer agency agreement or a buyer broker agreement?
Yeah, I get that asked all the time, and it's the same thing. Ours is the MREC employment exclusive right to purchase. We just call it the loyalty agreement, and I have some tips and tricks on that that we'll go through on things I could do to help you understand ways to kind of make that an easier conversation. But I just think that it sounds better whenever I say, I know that we've had a long conversation, and basically what this document means is that I'm going to be loyal to you and you're going to be loyal to me. Are you ready to sign that with us today? And so we can start the next process. The other reason why it's important is because if you run a showing partner model, you want to make sure that the client is going to be loyal to you before you send somebody out, drive 30 minutes to go start showing houses. So we treat it very, very much like a listing agreement. You can't put a sign in the yard to put it on the MLS if you don't have paperwork signed. And I think that there's value in that. That person's going to work with you and they're going to be loyal to you.
I agree. I think it's also that level of professionalism, right? We talk a lot of times about not being a Pop-Tart, right? We don't want to take a call if somebody wants to see a house and we pop out and show it, right? So what we're looking at in our time together is getting everyone to the point of running this like a business instead of maybe a traditional real estate agent would run it. So we're saying we're different, right? We show up different. We're more prepared. We're gonna forward pace the buyer, right? It's on our time frame. Now we are gonna find them the best house and we're gonna take great care of them. At the same time, though, there are expectations like getting that loyalty agreement signed before we would, pop out and show them a house.
Yeah.
So we've got 6 weeks coming up of Kari and I every Thursday from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. Please, if you want to register, you can scan that QR code and I'm going to see if we've got any questions. We do. So Kari, there's a question in the chat. Do you require them, a buyer, to have and show you a pre-approval letter before you go out to show them homes?
One of the great things about COVID that came was that it really, really pushed everyone to get that up front. And then it just became a standard for our team. So yes, we want everybody pre-approved before they come and meet with the strategy session. If not, they've made contact, they're filling out an application. I have, Josh that's reached out and they're in the middle of their application. Hopefully I'll have everything done, but we want to see that proof of funds or pre-approval. I think it's super important. And it's an easy ask, you guys. Anybody that's gotten pre-approved, it's not a hard process. You can do it over the phone or online.
I agree. And just to kind of point out some fair housing guidelines, if you require it from one, you have to require it from all. So if you're going to ask for that proof of funds or pre-approval letter from one buyer, you need to make sure you just to cover yourself that you ask them for all. So Farzana asked the question, what kind of questions do you ask to understand their motivation timeline? So for me, I might ask a question of Kari and say, okay, Kari, I know that you mentioned wanting to be in Springfield, Missouri, really by the end of October and being moved in. So, if we're looking at Halloween, talk me through that. Do you want to be moved in so that you can pass out candy on Halloween? Or are you like, it's fine if we're in the process of unpacking? And so if Kari says, no, I've got twin girls, we need to be trick-or-treating, I've got to do this, then I'm going to say, okay, so how long will it take you to unpack? And Kari may say, really, I need 2 weeks. So then I'm backing her up to October 14th. And I'm saying, well, we traditionally in our market are going to see closings take anywhere from 30 to 45 days by the time we locate the house and negotiate a property. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of narrowing Kari in on where does she want to be and by when. And my follow-up question would be, okay, Kari, what happens if we don't find the house and we're not in it by Halloween? And if Kari says, not an option, I have to be in the house, that stresses me out, I'm going to find a house. Guess what? Kari's a right now buyer. We are going and looking and I'm going to find her that house. Yeah. Now, if Kari's like, you know what? I've got my parents live in town and they're down at the lake and I have the ability to stay in their house for, really a month or two. And she's already kind of planning which bedrooms her girls are going to stay in, and that she really wouldn't mind a trick or treat in her parents' neighborhood and all of these things. Kari's plan B is so detailed that I'm going to look at it and say, you know what? Kari's going to take a little bit, like this is going to have to be a really great house for me to get her to move. So what we're doing is we're just layering those questions to get a really good feel for, is she really what she appears to be in a right now buyer that needs to be moved in, or does she have some flexibility? Kari, anything you'd add to that before we wrap up?
The only thing I say is like do everything in extremes, and you kind of nailed on it. So it's like, do we need to be in by October? Or do we need to be in by next October? You know, we're really like throwing in like a right now or like a really far out, and then we just narrow in. So
I love that. I love that. Cool. Well, it was good to see everyone. I hope you all have a great day, and we will see you next Thursday.